Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Phillies Talk. It's Phillies Talk Podcast, the All-Star Game edition, and it's going to be a great show tonight. I'm going to have a special guest on a little bit later, and that's Louis Schiff. He is a huge Marlins fan, as well as a baseball author who lives outside of Miami, Florida, among other things. He's sort of like the Ben Franklin of baseball down there, I like to say. He's got many hats, great guy. I'll be talking to him a little bit later in the show about the Phillies and Marlins series, how good the Marlins have been this year. Has it been a surprise to him? And he's been on the show before. And it's been a while since I've talked to him, so it's a great time getting together with him, talking a little bit about the Marlins and their success and who will be in the All-Star game for them. Well, like I said at the beginning of the show, it's the All-Star break edition of Phillies Talk Podcast, and just a few facts about the All-Star game here. The first All-Star game was in Chicago in 1933 to celebrate the Chicago Centennial, the 100th year anniversary of that city. So, what a great time it was to kick that off for Major League Baseball and in a great town of Chicago. Anybody that's been to Chicago, specifically Wrigley Field, and over watching the White Sox know it's a great place to watch a ball game. A lot of great fans out there, almost like a different country, so to speak, in that neck of the woods. They clap for ground outs, so you got to go experience that if you haven't experienced Wrigley yet. I wholeheartedly recommend it. So the game starts around 7:30 p.m. In the East, 4:30 local time out there in Seattle for the All-Star game, Tuesday, July 11th. And it'll be on Fox, televised nationwide. Of course, the Home Run Derby is tonight, the day that I'm taping this podcast. So we'll have a new home run champion to talk about on the next Phillies Talk. And hopefully my co-host Matt Veazey will be able to join me. We're getting, things underway for maybe a midweek podcast. So we'll be able to talk to Matt about the start of the Philly season after the All-Star break, typically known as the second half, so to speak, even though the season is well over half over at this point. At the ballpark for the All-Star game, the American League will take batting practice from 2 p.m. to 2:55 p.m., and then the National League has it from 3 p.m. to 3:55 p.m. So nice scheduling there. A ton of events planned around the All-Star game. It's not just the All-Star game. You have softball tournaments. You have MLB Future Games. You have the Home Run Derby. It's about a 5-day extravaganza of events. And of course, Philadelphia will host this event on the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and this country, which will be 2026, just a couple years from now. And Philadelphia is overdue to host this event. They seem to want to do that at times that is, historically significant. And Veterans Stadium was held in 1976, and then again 20 years later in 1996. But, we've had Citizens Bank Park open now from 2004, and we haven't had an All-Star game there yet. So this stadium is nearly 20 years old and has never hosted an All-Star game. So 2026 should be the time for that. So a little trivia for you. There's only been 3 times where an All-Star game has either been rained out or suspended in history. And believe it or not, the first time ever rain was an issue for the All-Star game was in Philadelphia way back in 1952 when the National League won 3-2, and that game was called after 5 innings due to rain. Another time, 1961, and back in the 60s and certain years, there was 2 All-Star games per year, not just one. But in the second All-Star game of the season for 1961, that ended in a tie 1-1 at Fenway Park in Boston. And that was called after 9 innings, a tie, again, due to rain. But that was an official game, of course, 9 innings. And 1969, the National League won 9-3. That game was rescheduled at RFK Stadium in Washington. So only twice did a All-Star game end in a tie, and you already heard about the first one back in 1961. And just most recently, some 21 years ago, back in 2002, it ended in a tie. Both games, the only time that that's ever happened. So a lot of hoopla around the All-Star game. And of course, it's the best players in baseball taking part in that. If you look at some of that All-Star history, you can see some of those great names, Roberto Clemente, you name it, they were in the games. Go back into the 60s and the 50s. It's the best of baseball. So take delight in knowing that when you watch this year's All-Star game, you're watching the best. And for the Phillies, Nick Castellanos getting his second All-Star nod after his bounce back season, so to speak. Some people called it a bounce back season. He called it getting used to his new surroundings, and he was voted into the All-Star game this year. So congratulations to Castellanos on that feat, and he's earned it. He's really played the best for this year for the Phillies so far. Bryce Harper narrowly getting beat out by JD Martinez from the Dodgers for DH. And it would have been nice to see a guy like Harper make the All-Star game, and some other Phillies as well. It would have been nice, but unfortunately they did not measure up to the success of an All-Star. So it'll be Nick Castellanos and Craig Kimbrell representing the Philadelphia Phillies. And incidentally, for Kimbrell, that's his 9th visit to the All-Star game. So he's no stranger there, been around the game for many years, and has been an All-Star. I think you're seeing somebody that might be in the Hall of Fame in Kimbrell. He's just got too many credentials. He just made his 400th save not too long ago, and 9 All-Star games. I mean, what does a guy have to do to get into the Hall of Fame anymore? So as I said, the Phillies going to host that 2026 All-Star game. I already have my Sunday plan, and I have plans to keep a ticket plan in effect for me so I can get into the 2026 All-Star game. I want to take a nice vacation around that and really soak it in, because like I said, it doesn't happen in Philadelphia all that much. So when it does and you're local, you have to try to experience it. So let's take a look at the Phillies, and I was going to give them a grade and see how they have done this year. They are currently doing well. They're over 500, and they're very much on pace like they were last year. The Phillies are very close to the same record. I think last year they only had one more win over 500, 8 games as opposed to this year, 7 games. So a great showing from the Phillies. Can they make the playoffs again? That's the big question. Everybody is wanting to know. Will they catch the Braves? I don't know. Will anybody catch the Braves? Right now, they have one of the best records in baseball. And in a second, I'll just bring that up for you. But believe it or not, the Miami Marlins are ahead of the Phillies. They beat the Phillies 2 of 3 games, which was a little disappointing after the Phils went in and swept the Tampa Rays. I didn't expect a sweep of the Marlins, but I expected them to do a little better. But they did drop 2 of 3 to the Marlins. They could have been in a much better position by winning that series. But right now they are 26 and 25 away on the road. And as you heard in the media, I'm sure they won 13 games in a row on the road. So they really upped their record by winning on the road. Their home record at the All-Star break, the Phillies are 22 and 16. They're still 12 games back behind the Atlanta Braves, though. The Braves are 60 wins and 29 losses, incredible record. And the Phillies stand at 48 and 41, 7 games over 500, but 12 games full back behind the Atlanta Braves, who don't appear to be looking back in the rearview mirror too often. They almost have an identical record home and away to the Braves. They're 30 and 15 at home and 30 and 14 away. So Atlanta has a plus 147 run differential as well against teams that they've played so far. I believe that's the best in the National League, 147 runs, run differential. Over in the American League, the Texas Rangers and the Tampa Bay Rays have a slightly higher number. The Tampa Bay Rays are at plus 149 on the season so far. They've scored more runs than their opponents by 149 runs. And the Texas Rangers are 148 runs ahead of their opponents, both leading their respective divisions out there. The Tampa Bay Rays leading the American League East, and the Texas Rangers in the lead out there in the American League West. So Cleveland Guardians rose up from nowhere. They're at a 500 record in the NL Central. And right now, as of the All-Star break, they are in first place, believe it or not. A 500 record in the AL Central gets you first place. So I guess all those Cleveland fans are happy out there. Maybe Ed Casputis is doing a little dance. Of course, he's the chief of Baseball PhD podcast, a shameless plug for Ed and the gang there for his podcast. So check it out, Baseball PhD. That's their neck of the woods there in Cleveland. So let's look around the National League. As I said, the Braves, with their foot on the accelerator in the NL East, have a big lead. Over in the Central, it's a dog's race. Cincinnati Reds currently on top. They've been hot lately, 7-3 in their last 10, and they are 50 and 41. So they're 9 games over 500. I don't think too many people were picking the Cincinnati Reds earlier in the season. So a couple surprise teams there in the National League, the Miami Marlins being one, the Cincinnati Reds being another. And over in the NL West, it's the LA Dodgers and the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks came out of nowhere, it seems like, and have tied the Los Angeles Dodgers for first place out there in the National League West. All right. Well, I hope you liked this quick look at the Phillies at the All-Star break. I'm going to run through a grade for each player, if you will. and see if your grade sort of melds with mine. We'll go with the starting pitchers. They'll all get a grade. Aaron Nola, I'm going to give him a B minus, almost a C. Um, he did win some games for the Phillies, and he has looked good for the Phillies, but of course, he's looked pretty bad at times too. So I'm going to give him a B minus, almost a C, but I won't call it a C. Zach Wheeler, I'll give him a solid B for the season so far. Taijuan Walker, I'll give him a B. He's been holding up his end of the bargain. Ranger Suarez, I will give a C minus to. He's had a couple good starts since he's come back, but he's not been that guy that you can rely on for the Phillies. Christopher Sanchez, same thing. I'll give him a C. And I hope the Phillies can improve their pitching now after the All-Star break. All right, let's go with some of the position players. JT Realmuto, I'm going to give him an A in the catching department. I think he's been carrying this team a lot of games. And of course, he started out with the Miami Marlins a few years ago. I'll talk to Louis in a little bit about that. Let's go with Derek Hall. I'm going to give him a C as well, getting back up to the big club for the minors. Let's go with second base, Bryson Stott. I'm going to give him an A for the Phillies so far for this year. He's a guy that's been getting on base, scrappy player, has been getting base hits, doesn't swing for the fences, and he's been delivering for the Phillies. When he does well, the Phillies do well. All right, moving over to third base, I'll give Alec Bohm a minus. I'm going to just leave a little room for improvement for him and hope that he does better in the second half. I think he's capable of carrying this team. Edmundo Sosa, I'll give him a grade. I'll give him a solid B. He's been pretty respectable, maybe even a B minus for him, but somewhere in the B. Trey Turner, I'm going to have to go with a C minus on him. And I don't want to say a D because he hasn't been that bad, but I'm going to say that he's got the most room to improve of any Phillies player going for the second half of the season here after the All-Star break. Kyle Schwarber, I'll have to give him an A. I wish he had a higher batting average, but his home runs are energetic for this team. Without him, I feel that they would lack that power, and for that reason, I have to give him an A. Brandon Marsh, same thing. I'll have to give him a high B. I'm going to give him a B plus. He's been steady. He's been hitting the ball for the Phillies, tracking them down in center field. And of course, out there in right field, Nick Castellanos, I'm going to give him an A. He made the All-Star game. What more can you say about him? He's had a good season so far for the Phillies. And for DH, of course, Bryce Harper, I'll give him a solid B. He came back into playing every day practically as DH off his injury. So he has room to improve, but I will give him a solid B. He almost made the All-Star game for 2023. Well, that's my grades for the Phillies. I hope you like them. And coming right up, I'll be talking with Mr. Louis Schiff about the Marlins series that just was, a little bit about the All-Star game as well. I hope you like this edition of Phillies Talk, and please stay tuned. Next up is Louis Schiff on the show. All right. And I'd like to welcome into the broadcast for Phillies Talk a very special guest, Mr. Louis Schiff from Miami, Florida. How you doing, Louis?
Doing wonderful, Rich. It's been a long time. It's great to see you. It's
Great
great.
to see you. And you are a author of a great book that you did. And why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about that, a little bit of background about your baseball writings?
A few years ago, Professor Jarvis and I from Nova wrote a book called Baseball and the Law: Cases and Materials. It's published by Carolina Academic Press, and it takes you through baseball and legal issues and social issues from the 1700s all the way through about 2015, 2016, when the book was published. We talk about contracts, we talk about torts, we talk about broadcasting. It could be used. I've had students tell me when I've taught this class that it could be actually used as a primer for law school because it covers all the major areas, real estate. And so like we have a lot of cases in there, but we also have a lot of dialogue, encyclopedia kind of dialogue told in a story form. So if you're used to looking at a law school case book, this isn't your typical law school case book. A lot of people have used it for research assistant, and some people have just used it. Well, let me read what's in the book, and then every day, Bob and I put out on Twitter at Baseball and Law a daily tweet about something significant that happened in baseball and law on the particular day. So depending upon the day, depends upon, are we talking about somebody getting arrested? Like, for example, today we talk about 1902, a ball player getting arrested in Indiana because at the beginning of the baseball season, he signed two contracts with two different teams. And back in the early 1900s, this was known as either a team jumping kind of a thing. So a player would get a deal from one team, get paid a few bucks, and then the next thing you know, they jumped leagues and they're with another team, maybe even the same league for a few dollars more. And this was a case where this gentleman got arrested in Indiana, and the Indiana judge threw out the case saying, no, it's not a crime to sign two contracts, but it could be a civil lawsuit. And that led us to talking about the Lajoie decision, where he did just that also in 1902, where he was enjoined from playing baseball in the state of Pennsylvania, which is your hometown there.
Yes,
And
yes.
what Lajoie had to do, he never played, for a while. He just didn't go to Pennsylvania and play. When his team was in Pennsylvania, he knew they were looking for him, so he just stayed out of Pennsylvania while they were playing there.
Yeah, almost like double dipping, I guess. You sign one contract and then you get in with another. That's interesting. So make sure you give them a follow on Twitter. And you're down in Miami, so you're a Miami Marlins fan, and the Phillies just happen to be down there just prior to the start of the All-Star break here. And I'll tell you what, I'm starting to wonder if your Marlins aren't the real deal this year.
I don't know, Rich. We had I jokingly said it was a meatloaf series for us because 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But if we can only learn how to beat the Braves, uh, we had going into the All Star break. We right now have the second best record in the National League. But I'll put an asterisk there because the teams we played the first half of the season are not going to be the same type of teams we played the second half. So we played Kansas City and we played Oakland and we did very well against them. But now we're going to have to play the Astros and the Dodgers and the Yankees, more games with the Phillies, more games with the Mets, more games with the Braves. We start the second half of the season in Baltimore, and Baltimore is on the top of the American League wild card. And then we go to St. Louis, and St. Louis is a tough team. I don't care that they're struggling this year. They're tough. We took 3 out of 4 from them when they were down here this past week, and they're not happy about it. And I am sure they're looking at us like, all right, with the date circled. So
Hmm.
we'll see. The team has played much better than expectations. If you would have told me, Rich, at the beginning of the season, the Marlins would be 14 games over at the All-Star break, I'd say no. Then if you told me that Jazz Chisholm would be non-existent for the season, basically, I'd say no, can't be. And then if you told me Cy Sandy as SY as opposed to SIGH, Cy Sandy would have an ERA north of 4 and a losing record, I'd say that's impossible. The team's going to have 30, 35 wins, maybe 40 wins at the best. And yet they have won with a new manager and a new dedication. And every night someone else
Steps
All of
up.
a sudden delivers. They step up, yesterday Luis Ariz goes 0 for 4. Okay, no big deal. Brian De La Cruz goes 4 for 4.
Yeah.
And so every day I have a dear friend of mine who will be watching this, Ed. I won't say his last name, but dear friend of mine, Ed, who's a lifetime Philly fan. And he was razzing me that Arise was 0 for 4. And I'll take an 0 for 4 day from Arise every single day as long as the Marlins win a ball game. So it's not about, I think right now the team is playing for the name on the front of the jersey as opposed to the names on the back of the jersey.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. And they're not big names that you're hearing with $100 million contracts, $200 million contracts. They're
No,
players that were brought up in the Marlins system, and they've got a wonderful track record of bringing up these guys that they make superstars out of. You can take some of the names of the past, Giancarlo Stanton, Josh Johnson, Miguel Cabrera, all got their starts with the Marlins. Christian Yelich, JT Realmuto, now currently with the Phillies, was a Marlin in the beginning. So they must be doing something right down there with the scouting. That's all I can say.
they've had a couple of fortunate uh, signings. So if you look at our team right now, the only player on the team that was signed by Derek Jeter's group is Fortes, the catcher. Everybody else was acquired before him or through other means. And so, with a guy like Jorge Soler, former World Series MVP, he's finally playing very well. Brian De La Cruz is playing very well. Arise, that I think the Twins and us both can't complain about that trade. Lopez is going to be on the All-Star team. Arise is on the All-Star team. John Birdie is an all-around player. He's kind of like the Miguel Rojas of the team this year. You can put him anywhere. Garrett Cooper is finally coming into his own a little bit. Jesus Sanchez, the same thing. So everybody, every night, it seems like somebody else is picking it up, and they've been very fortunate. When Jazz Chisholm went down the first time, they brought up Davis, and then when Davis went down, they brought up the new kid, Dane Myers, who hit his first major league home run in the Sunday game. They've been very fortunate. They've gotten some very key hits and key pitching, and that's the Marlins have always had good pitching, but the hitting. They're number 3 in the National League in hitting right now, maybe even number 3 in the major leagues in hitting right now, which is incredible. Their strikeouts are way down. Their double plays, hitting at the double plays are up. But I think I'd rather put the ball in play and see where it goes than striking out all the time. So their strikeouts are much lower. Their double plays are a little higher, but that's okay. They're playing aggressive. They're almost like it's almost like small ball. They're slapping at the ball and they're just trying to put the ball where the fielders aren't.
Yeah, and they have 53 wins on the season so far. That's more than the LA Dodgers. And I'm sure the Dodgers have a payroll that's probably 4 times the Marlins, maybe more. I haven't looked, but yeah, the Marlins have been a success story, probably one of the biggest ones, unless you want to look at Baltimore a little bit. They have 54 wins over there, and as you said, they'll be the first opponent coming out of the All-Star break.
I,
Um, it's going to be nice, this All-Star game, 2023. It's the 93rd All-Star game in history. And what do you see as far as Luis Arias and Jorge Soler? How do you think they're going to fare in this All-Star game?
but when the Marlins were in Seattle earlier this season, Luis Ariz didn't even get a hit. Maybe he had one hit, so he had a miserable series in Seattle. Soler, on the other hand, hit better. The All-Star game doesn't mean as much as it did a few years ago, where the winning team that league gets home field advantage. And there's a lot of things that I don't like about the All-Star game. That's one, because I really like the competition. Two, I don't like everybody wearing the same jersey. But
Right.
now, you remember when we were kids and you'd watch the All-Star game and the Phillies were all in their Philly blues, and the Mets were in their orange and blue, and the Cardinals were in their red, and the Yankees were in their pinstripes. And you look at it, and it's this wonderful rainbow of players. And you know who the National is, and you know who the American League is. And you saw all of that. The Astros with the stars across the jerseys, things like that when they were in the other league. And so it was nice to see. And now they're in these generic Nationals, Americans. And I know it's there because they're going to try to sell more jerseys. But I like it when they were there in their own hats and their own jerseys. And it just looked really nice.
Yeah, it's definitely a sign of the times with the jerseys that they wear. I kind of like it. It gives you cohesiveness for each side. And as you said, there's another opportunity to get yourself another jersey, spend a
Yeah,
little
Major League
cabbage
Baseball.
on it, maybe.
I
Um, just 45 minutes ago, this came off the wire here. The Marlins reinstated Johnny Cueto from a 60-day IL. So you're going to have another weapon in your pitching arsenal there when you get back from
I
break.
I so I don't think that's a weapon. Have you
Okay.
seen he was getting hit? He was like just he was they were ringing him up in the minor league games. They sent down Perez, but they don't want to give him so many innings. But the kid Perez, Yuri Perez, his ERA is well, he got rocked in that one game in Atlanta. So his ERA was in the low, it was below one. I mean, below two. Now it's in the mid twos. But they're bringing him down supposedly to save him. I don't know. I'd rather him go five strong innings and let the bullpen pitch because I don't think Johnny Cueto will last till the end of July.
The end
I
of the
I just don't see it happening.
Yeah,
I
I
hope
remember.
well because the last thing I know as a Marlins fan, a season ticket holder, the last thing I want to see is him lose ball games. But I just don't have a lot of confidence in him in pitching because he really didn't display any skills when he was doing all his rehab games.
Right, yeah, he has gotten a little bit up there in years, 16 major league seasons under his belt. If anything, he has some experience. Maybe the young guys can learn a little bit from him if he does make it up to the team. I read that he will start out probably in the minors to get himself acclimated. And as you said, he might not even make it through July to get it back into the Marlins rotation. But another question I have for you is the many years of Don Mattingly coaching that team. Is Skip Schumacher doing anything different than Mattingly, or you think that this group is just a different group and they meld together a little bit better?
Think they're a little bit different. I heard Skip coming home from the game last night talking about what he's preached from day one. He's put together a team of coaches that are used to winning, and not Mattingly, of course, was used to winning too. Uh, but Skip's younger than Mattingly, and maybe there's a bigger connection. Maybe he's closer to the game. Uh, he's brought in some new coaches around him. He's kept the pitching coach in Stottlemyre, but he brought in some new people, and you can see the difference in the approach when they get to bat. I think a lot of that's attributable also to a guy like Luis Arise, who, as a leadoff hitter, is kind of leading the way, and they're talking about plate discipline. They're talking about a game plan, not just Skip. These were Skip's words yesterday. It's not just see ball, hit ball. It's what's your game plan when you're up, what's your plan of attack, how many, that type of thing, as opposed to see ball, hit ball. And so I think that's been different. Like I said, strikeouts are down. This is not a team that's going to hit you a lot of home runs, but they are going to be able to go, uh, first to home on a double. They take chances. Even yesterday, was it Segura that got thrown out at home plate yesterday, trying to go from first to home on a double? I mean, they're trying. I mean, maybe it's because they were playing the Phillies yesterday. He wanted to show the team that they should have kept him. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, that's possible. Hey, with the rule changes this year in baseball, the major rule changes, do you have a favorite one and one that you don't like to talk about?
I like the pitch clock. I,
Ah,
I like it. I don't know. I like so I can go to a ball game now. I don't like the times the Marlins start their game at 6:40. I wish they moved it back to 7:10, but you can go to a 6:40 game and be out of the ballpark by 9 o'clock, which puts me at home by 10 o'clock, which
right.
means I can go to bed and get to work the next morning and not feel like I stayed up too late. I love the pitch clock. The players have gotten used to it. Schwarber struck out this weekend on a pitch clock violation. I think Birdie struck out on a pitch clock violation. It's going to happen, but for the most part, everybody's going along with it. The shift has worked. I read an article in The Athletic a month or two ago citing that that's one of the reasons that Sandy wasn't pitching as well as he pitched last year, because the shift really helped him. But the players have adjusted. Uh, Baseball is still baseball. And Major League Baseball has made changes over the years. One of the changes that was made that they did, the pitch clock is not a new invention. The pitch clock goes back to the early 1900s, and they just got away from it and they stopped enforcing it. It's like a rule of court. If you quit enforcing a rule in court, then the rule really doesn't exist. If the speed limit is 55 on I-95 and everybody's doing 75 and not getting tickets, then what's the speed limit?
Yeah.
How about
Interesting.
you? You don't like the pitch clock?
I'm not a big fan. When I go to the ballpark, especially, like you, I have about an hour commute. I want to be there for a little while. The first couple games this year, it seemed like it went by so fast. It was a blur. You
Mm-hmm.
get up, you go to the food stand to get something, you go to the restroom once or twice. You might want to walk around the ballpark a little bit, see the sights and the sounds other than the game a little bit. And if you're paying all that money, it seems like you're out of there like a fast movie sometimes. And a couple of the games this year, it just went by too fast for me. So I wasn't a big
Okay.
fan. I go there to relax. I go there to, soak in the sights and the
Right.
sounds. But
Mhm.
so far, it's been just a little too fast for me.
Okay.
But other than that, so the pitch clock for me would be something that I would like to see extended a little bit. I think
More time instead of 15 seconds, 20 seconds maybe, and then
I
maybe
would
5 seconds when there's a man on.
I would say at least, five, possibly more, because that back and forth between pitcher and batter doesn't really exist anymore. It's get the ball, throw it. The batter's got to be alert. The pitcher's rushing. I think it's led to a little bit of, you know, uh, difference in baseball that we've seen before. There's not that, you know, chess battle, so to speak. It's like, here's the ball, see if you can hit it. Um, I'm under stress for time, like time is a stressful
Bob
thing.
Gibson, Bob Gibson got ball throws through ball. Juan Marichal got ball through ball. Tom
Yeah,
Seaver, Olin Ryan, Steve
yeah,
Carlton, all those guys got ball throw ball. They didn't
yeah,
want to waste any time between pitches. I just somehow think that the game has just gotten away, and the fans, I think, especially TV fans, you don't want to turn a ball game on at say 7 o'clock and be sitting there at 10:30. Still, you want to. Yes, I think you're right. It's shortening it. It doesn't shorten the number of plays. They still get the same number of commercials in, because you'll notice they didn't shrink the time in between innings. So
yeah,
they get their TV time, and the replays they can play, on a side screen. It's still, but we'll see how they adjust at the end of the season, what they're going to do, and whether they're going to keep it. Stolen bases are up. I think that's fun. The
yeah.
bigger base. That's why stolen bases are up too. You're now what, half a foot closer. I love the oven mitts. This is what I don't understand. A guy has an oven mitt on, like 8 feet
Yeah.
long. It's like, is there a standard to how long your oven mitt can be?
Something from a movie like an octopus arm or something.
Right. All of a sudden, he gets on first base. He puts it on, and then it's like a fishing rod. It's like all of
Ex
us. It's 25
exactly.
feet and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we're going to get the probably the fluorescent colors and this, that, and the other coming down the pike. But Louis, it was a great time speaking with you. And as we said
Same here, Rich.
at the start of this, it's not going to be that long this time. I'm going to bring you back on the show. We're going to talk because we have a lot of things to talk about between the Marlins and the Phillies. So,
One last thing. When Stott got hit yesterday,
yes.
they got a little testy, and there were a bunch of Philly fans. I sit behind the visitors dugout, so there's a lot of Philly. There's always visitors there,
Uh-huh.
and they were saying he did it on purpose. And I said to the folks sitting next to me, now, why would he hit the guy before Sosa, when Sosa hit a moonshot that hasn't even landed yet? I understand, if Sosa wasn't up next, and because the Stott had already had a couple of hits, but you're up you're up 5-2 at that time. You hit a batter, and now you put Sosa up, who just just destroyed a baseball to left field. It's like, nah, maybe he crowded the plate, maybe he got a little inside, but I don't think that was a purpose pitch. I know they were upset because of the day before for hitting Harper.
Yeah. Sometimes those things can, you know, get a
Bubble up
little testy
and a
you know,
bubble up in the second half, when
yeah.
the because I don't think the Phillies are gonna quit. Your road winning streak was not a fluke. You have a great team. There's great chemistry on that team. Yeah, you won Friday night. Puck, you know, threw a home run, and that was it. Great come from behind win for the Phillies. And the Phillies are the kind of team that they don't give up either. And there's no reason why both the Marlins and the Phillies can't be, in the wild card. Again, I don't think anybody's going to touch Atlanta at this point. But,
Yeah, Atlanta's on fire. They'll be the ones to catch if at all by
mm-hmm.
anyone, but the Marlins and the Phillies are still, I think, within striking distance. It's going to be interesting. The Mets, who knows, they're starting to wake up again as of the All-Star break, and it's going to be a race to the finish, I think.
Should be fun. I mean, it really should be fun. For me, watching a team that hasn't, well, the 2020 season was an asterisk season. They made a playoffs and but you couldn't go to the games. You had to watch them on TV. Uh, this is a real season. This is fun.
Yes, it is. Follow him at Baseball and Law, all one word, Baseball and Law on
Thank
Twitter. You'll get a good dose of, nice things to read about the game, history, as Louis was saying, and you might just learn a thing or two. So give him a follow there on Twitter. And
Thank
Louis, thanks again for joining me, and good luck to your Marlins in the second half.
All right, and good luck to the Phillies too.
Yep.
They're a great team. They play real competitive ball. Should be fun the next 2.5 months.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
Take care.
Take care now.